As we pass the milestone of 60, we can't help but wonder, who will be there when we really need them? In youth, the answer seems simple and obvious. Family, closest friends, people with whom we share years of friendship and memories. However, as we mature, reality can look quite different. Life makes its adjustments, people get busy, priorities change, and suddenly you realize that the support system you once believed in unconditionally may not be as reliable as it seemed. This review will reveal 6 key pillars that, over time, become a more solid foundation than even family. This isn't about alienation from loved ones, but about understanding the true sources of stability and confidence in the future, so you don't find yourself defenseless when support is needed most. Building a solid foundation based on these 6 principles will provide the security and independence needed to overcome life's challenges. Don't miss a single detail, because these 6 pillars can completely change your perception of support and mutual assistance, and once you realize their importance, you'll never have to feel helpless, lonely, or unprepared again. So the first and perhaps most important pillar is financial stability. The most reliable support you can have is your own financial independence. Money, of course, can't buy happiness, but it provides security, freedom, and peace of mind. As you get older, you realize more and more that relying on family for financial help is not so much a plan as it is a serious risk. Children have their own lives, their own expenses, and their own families to care for. And even with great love and a desire to help, they may not always be in a position to do so when support is needed most. Consider the story of Richard, a 72-year-old man who was always confident that his children would come to his aid if he faced financial difficulties. He helped them pay for their education, lent them money when they needed it, and was always there when they turned to him. But when unexpected health problems depleted his savings, he turned to his children and realized that they themselves were barely managing their mortgages, bills, and other financial obligations. It wasn't a lack of care, but the unpredictability of life itself. Financial stability emerges as one of the most reliable foundations of well-being that a person can build in their life. The point is not to accumulate wealth, but to ensure readiness for any of life's twists and turns. This implies having a clear plan of action for unforeseen circumstances, a stable source of income that you can confidently rely on, and a deep understanding of the principles of personal finance management to avoid dependence on outside help. At the age of 60 and older, it is especially important to ask yourself a number of questions. Are there enough savings to cover unexpected expenses? Is there a stable retirement income? Are financial risks that could put you in a vulnerable position minimized? If the answers are disappointing, you need to act immediately. You should master the art of smart budgeting, avoid unnecessary debt, and invest in assets that can provide long-term stability. After all, financial security is the support that will always be there, regardless of life's vicissitudes. No less important is the pillar of physical health. There is an aspect of being that cannot be replaced by love, money, or the support of others, the state of one's own body. After 60, physical health becomes either a faithful ally or a serious obstacle to a fulfilling life. You can have all the financial guarantees in the world, but deteriorating health can rob you of freedom and independence. And while loved ones may care, they can't exercise, eat healthy, or stop the relentless aging process. This responsibility lies entirely with the individual. Unfortunately, many neglect their health, naively believing that if necessary, someone will take care of them. However, the reality is that even loving relatives have their own lives, worries, and obligations. They may not have enough time, energy, or resources to become a permanent caregiver. Dependence on others for healthcare can create feelings of helplessness and vulnerability. That is why prioritizing your physical condition in the present is one of the most valuable investments in your future well-being. Carl's story, a 68-year-old man, serves as a cautionary tale of how neglecting one's health in later years can lead to undesirable consequences. In his youth, he was remarkably active, but upon retirement he allowed himself to relax, naively believing he had plenty of time to catch up. But time flew by, and his energy levels noticeably declined. His mobility worsened, and performing basic tasks became a real challenge. His children visited as often as possible, but unfortunately, they couldn't be there every day to provide the necessary assistance. Ultimately, Carl realized that to maintain his independence, he needed to take control of his health. Not tomorrow, not next year, but right now. This doesn't mean engaging in strenuous workouts like professional athletes. Small, consistent efforts are enough, and over time, they will yield tremendous results. Daily physical activity, eating foods that nourish the body rather than harm it, and taking medical checkups seriously are the three pillars upon which health in older age is built. If you've been ignoring warning signs, whether it's persistent pain, difficulty walking, or changes in energy levels, it's time to stop putting off addressing these problems. Your future self will be immensely grateful for every healthy choice you make today. After all, the most reliable support system isn't children, siblings, or friends, but your own ability to remain strong, active, and capable. And the more attention you pay to your health now, the less you'll have to rely on anyone else in the future. An equally important aspect is one's social circle. One of the most common mistakes people make as they age is social isolation. This process can happen gradually. Friends move away, loved ones pass on, and before you know it, your social circle becomes much smaller than you ever imagined. The problem is that without strong friendships, loneliness creeps in, and loneliness, especially after 60, poses a serious danger. It negatively affects not only emotional well-being, but also health, cognitive function, and even life expectancy. Many assume that family will always be there to provide companionship, but unfortunately, this isn't always the case. Children have their own lives, careers, families, and responsibilities that take up a lot of time and energy. They may love you dearly, but they can't be your only source of social interaction. That's why having a broad social network, people who care about you, make you laugh, and bring energy into your life, is one of the most important factors in maintaining health and well-being in older age. These relationships aren't a luxury, they're a necessity. Consider the example of Margaret, a 73-year-old woman who always found solace in connecting with loved ones. Her two sons, full of love for their mother, gradually became consumed by career concerns and raising their own children. Despite regular phone calls, frequent visits, and traditional weekend gatherings became rare occurrences. Margaret increasingly felt lonely, anxiously awaiting calls that didn't always come. At one point, she decided to change the situation. Margaret reconnected with old friends, joined a community organization, and took up new hobbies, which allowed her to make interesting acquaintances. Lively conversations, genuine laughter, and a sense of purpose flooded her life. She no longer had to passively wait for family attention. She became the architect of her own social life. Friendships, participation in community groups, and even casual acquaintances provide an invaluable sense of belonging. Whether it's a casual chat with a neighbor, attending a book club, or taking classes at the local gym, having people outside the family circle creates a solid foundation of emotional resilience. And the more social connections a person makes in the present, the more reliable their support will be in the future. Therefore, it's worth asking yourself, who brings joy to your life today? If the answer isn't obvious, then it's time to expand your social circle. After all, a strong social network isn't just about having company. It's about having people who support you, remind you of your worth, and enrich every stage of life. The fourth pillar of well-being is personal purpose. One of the most underestimated sources of life support isn't another person, but your own pursuit of a goal. After 60, many people face changes. Roles that once filled life with meaning, parent, worker, caregiver, gradually lose their significance. Retirement arrives, children become independent, and the pace of life slows down. In the absence of a clear sense of direction, it's easy to feel unnoticed, unneeded, or even lost. The reality is that despite all the love and care from family, they cannot provide a person with a life purpose. This is a task that everyone must solve for themselves. Having a motivation to wake up in the morning, whether it's a passionate hobby, a significant project, or a lofty goal, supports mental clarity, emotional stability, and a fulfilling life. It's what allows you to stay engaged in the world, rather than simply observing it from the sidelines. For example, take the story of George, a 70-year-old retired engineer. Initially, he enjoyed his well-deserved rest, but after a few months, he began to feel anxious and like something important was missing. The days seemed empty and monotonous. His children visited him, but they had their own lives. Then George decided to take action. He started volunteering at a local school, teaching children the basics of construction. Soon, he had a new reason to get up in the morning, an activity that gave him a sense of significance, usefulness, and engagement in life. Purpose doesn't necessarily have to be related to professional activities. It can be any activity that fills life with energy and joy. Learning new things, mentoring others, gardening, painting, traveling, or even just setting personal goals. The main thing is to engage in something that brings satisfaction and keeps you mentally and emotionally active. If you feel like your best days are behind you, you need to change your mindset. Purpose doesn't disappear with age, it only transforms. And the more effort you put into finding meaning in everyday life, the less you need to rely on others for happiness. Ultimately, the most reliable support you can have is not a hand to hold in difficult times, but an inner fire that continuously pushes you forward. The fifth pillar of longevity is emotional resilience. Life tests everyone, regardless of age. After 60, problems don't disappear, they just change their form. Friendships weaken, loved ones pass away, health problems arise, and sometimes life seems lonelier than before. But no matter how much support others provide, the most reliable source of strength is always within a person. The ability to adapt to change, cope with emotions, and find inner peace in difficult moments allows you to move forward, even when circumstances don't go as expected. Excessive dependence on family for emotional support is becoming increasingly common, as people believe that their children, siblings, or other relatives will always be there to offer comfort. However, as reality shows, everyone faces their own difficulties, and they may not always have enough time or energy to serve as a source of necessary emotional stability. That's why developing emotional resilience is so important. This quality allows a person to find inner strength, rather than constantly seeking it in the external world. For example, consider the story of 75-year-old Helen, who lost her husband after 40 years of marriage. Initially, she turned to her children for emotional support, but over time, she realized that despite their care, they had their own families and responsibilities. Helen understood that she couldn't expect them to fill the inner void. Instead of letting grief consume her, she focused on strengthening her emotional resilience. She joined a support group, started journaling, and practiced gratitude daily. Over time, Helen made an important discovery. She didn't need someone else to heal her sadness. She had the strength to cope with it herself. Emotional resilience doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending to be constantly strong. It's about acknowledging pain, processing it in a healthy way, and developing coping mechanisms that allow you to handle life's ups and downs with dignity. It's important to have various outlets for emotions, whether it's writing, meditation, therapy, or self-reflection, that help you find inner peace without relying on others to provide it. Regardless of life's challenges, the ability to stand on your own 2 feet will always be one of the most valuable sources of support. The more a person develops their emotional resilience, the less they feel dependent on others to achieve a sense of wholeness. After all, the person who will always be there through all the trials and triumphs is oneself. The sixth cornerstone of well-being in later years is the ability to adapt. If there is one undeniable truth about life after 60, it is that it is constantly changing. People change their views, life circumstances undergo metamorphoses, and things that were once unconditionally reliable lose their former dependability. The key to prosperity at this stage of life lies not in desperately clinging to the fleeting past, but in the ability to react flexibly to the challenges of the present. Most often, those who fiercely resist change, clinging to the obsolete and refusing to accept the new reality, encounter the difficulties of aging. However, those who cultivate the ability to adapt, remain open to the new, and welcome emerging opportunities find joy and satisfaction, despite the vagaries of fate. It is widely believed that with age, a person becomes more entrenched in their beliefs, but this way of thinking is fraught with dangers. It can prevent the discovery of new horizons, meeting interesting people, and learning things that enrich life. Adaptability is not just a passive acceptance of change, but an active search for ways to grow and develop along with it. As an example, consider the story of 78-year-old Frank, who always maintained contact with the world through personal friendships. When many of his friends moved to other cities or passed away, he initially felt lost and lonely. Perhaps this is the fate of aging people, he thought. However, instead of resigning himself to loneliness, Frank decided to adapt to the new circumstances. He mastered video communication to maintain contact with his family living far away, joined an online history club, and even made new friends. Instead of allowing change to break him, he allowed it to contribute to his. Personal growth. People who thrive after 60 are not necessarily those with the most resources or a strong support system. They are those who refuse to become rigid in their habits, remain curious, and find ways to adapt to any life circumstances. If one door closes, they look for another. If relationships undergo changes, they find new ways to connect. If something stops working, they are willing to try something completely different. The ability to adapt is one of the most reliable pillars of support a person can have. It allows them to face life's challenges with resilience, optimism, and self-confidence. The more willingly a person accepts change instead of fearing it, the less they feel loss, and the more they realize that each stage of life brings new opportunities for acquisition. Entering the age of maturity, with 6 decades of life behind you, marks a period marked not only by accumulated wisdom, but also by unique challenges. And while family ties undoubtedly continue to occupy an important place in the heart, it is necessary to recognize that the most solid support one can count on lies not in the external environment, but in the personal foundation carefully built over a lifetime. Financial independence becomes a guarantee that in old age you will not have to burden loved ones with your needs. Good physical health ensures freedom of movement and independence in everyday affairs. A wide circle of communication supports social activity, involvement in society, and emotional well-being. Having a life goal fills each day with meaning and gives direction to the further path, regardless of age. Emotional stability serves as a reliable protection against the inevitable life adversities and disappointments. And finally, the ability to adapt to new. Circumstances allows you not just to survive, but to thrive, even when the usual course of things is disrupted. Relying on these 6 pillars, a person gains inner confidence and never feels abandoned. He does not have to ask for help, feel helpless in difficult moments, or expect someone to come to the rescue. True stability is born not from hope for the support of others, but from the awareness of one's own readiness to withstand any trials that life has prepared.